I am calling to order the July 24th meeting of the River Falls Board of Education. This meeting has been properly notified, and we will begin this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This evening, I'm going to take public comment at two different times. If you have a general comment for the board, or if you have a comment about any item on the agenda other than those that are listed in 6B, I'm going to take those comments now. If you would like to address the board specifically about an issue in 6B, which has to do with the policies that are before the board this evening, that public comment will be taken when we get to that point in the agenda. So at this point, I would like to hear from the community about any general issues that you have. If you would like to speak, please come, introduce yourselves to us. The microphone is there, and please limit your comments to 2 minutes. Yes, you. First up to the microphone.
Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Cheryl Maplethorpe. I live in River Falls. I've had 2 sons go through this school system, which is marvelous and always gets all sorts of awards. I just want to praise the school board members here for being school board members. In this environment, all right. In this environment, it is a difficult position at this time, and you are very courageous and brave to make sure that our students are getting a good education with truth and facts. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I've got a few comments that I'll save for later, but I got a general one. Jim Souter, you all know who I am. Community member. My first comment is, and I brought it up before, and I want to say it respectfully, but when we try to have so many policies that come through at one time in the middle of the summer that pertain to social norms, social values, whether that be instructional materials, whether that be transgender policies, etc., it comes across like, what are we trying to, we need more time, I think, to think these out, to have more people have input. Having said that, I've got a specific question with regard to the policies. Many of them are first readings. I'm still a little bit confused because if there's a first reading before the board that comes out of committee, it is not yet policy. So there's a first reading and a second reading, and I believe at the second reading, that is when it becomes policy. I could be mistaken. However, during a first reading, because you might have a lot of comments by the community, there may be, gosh, let's go back and edit some of this. Let's go back and do some rewrites. How much rewriting will constitute an additional or a second first reading, where you come back and say, we're going to start a first reading over again? Do you make minor changes between reading 1 and reading 2? Or if you decide to make some more significant changes, do you come back with another first reading of a policy? That's my question.
So I'll very briefly give a statement about the process of developing policy, which we talked about last time, Jim. When the school board is faced with the revision of a policy or the creation of a new policy, often, not always, but often it begins at a committee, at the committee level that is responsible for that area. So if it's a policy about an educational policy, it goes to educational programming. If it's a financial policy, it goes to finance and facilities, where they do initial work and then make a recommendation to the board about the policy. It is not a first reading for the board in committee. It only becomes a first reading once it gets to the board and is actually passed. It requires 2 readings in different board meetings, regular board meetings, before any policy becomes adopted by the board. And the board also has the right to be able to go back at any point and make revisions.
If I could just add a couple of things, and the board, for this portion of our agenda, the board typically, as Stacy mentioned, we want to be guarded, and somebody takes to the mic, and then we're all going to take turns replying. This is not a public forum right here. This is a school board meeting, and we have an agenda that we're going to follow. And so, that being said, I'll violate my own last statement, just a tweak here, to say that the school board could tonight adopt a policy. They could, for the first reading, and then it has to come back for a second reading to be official. In between the first and second, they could do a little bit of wordsmithing. I think if this evening they were to find that there was a significant amount of wordsmithing they wanted to do, they could A, table it, not have it be a first reading at all. B, send it back to committee and say, try again. C, they could say, administration, you go back and try again, bring it to the full board meeting. There's all kinds of options for how this can all be handled for this meeting tonight and any other meeting. Just wanted to clarify that there's options for how the board proceeds with any and all policies.
Would anyone else like to address the board this evening on a general topic, not on something that is already on the agenda under 6B?
Hi, I'm Pam Souter, and I want to thank you, Mr. Benson, for last at the Ed Committee meeting addressing my question about the human growth and development, that you had a review meeting you said last spring. So there are questions about, and I've asked this before, and I know you don't have to answer me right now, but I would like you to consider coming forth with how do people actually apply? Like Hudson, I asked this one time, Hudson opened it up to the public to actually apply if you're interested in becoming part of the Human Growth and Development Review Committee. So how would you actually do that? Are you going to open that up? And when would that be so that people can actually apply for that? Okay, thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the board?
I'm Rebecca Ferguson, and I'm a resident here and 2 grandchildren in the school system. I thought I would speak later, but I think this is the time that I do just want to say thank you. It's complicated work that you're doing, and I really appreciate the amount of time and effort that you put into it. This is a great school system. I'm amazed by it, so thank you. I'm really, really glad my grandkids are here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, I'm Christine Manick, and I live in River Falls, and I've taught for the school district entering 30 years now. And I'm also president of our teachers union. And last Tuesday, we came to a tentative agreement on our salary, on our wage increase. And our members have voted. They voted very quickly, and there were really a lot of thank yous and positive responses to what we've negotiated for our agreement. And in fact, I want to share this email from a teacher. Please tell the team, so the negotiations team, which is made up of teacher members, and it's not always real easy to go ask your boss for a raise. So tell them thanks for all their hard work and a good job on the recent contract agreement. I was on the negotiations team for 7 years, so I know about the work that goes into it and the disappointments, frozen wages. This is one of the better increases I have ever seen in my 26 years of teaching. It also shows that the River Falls School Board does appreciate their staff and will do anything to retain the staff they have. Hats off to both the negotiations team and the school board in working together. This was truly a team effort. Thanks. So again, I want to say that our members and teachers, thank you, the school board and our district office. It's great to show appreciation in words, but sometimes it's that monetary compensation that really helps. So thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the board? All right, then we're going to go on to the first informational item, which is an annual update from our school resource officers. And so, Chris and Brian, if you could wind your way up here, that would be helpful. I have to say I'm really pleased to have so many people this year able to hear about the good work that these two folks do.
Amen.
Usually it's only the board who gets to hear it, but this is extraordinarily significant, so please.
Go ahead, start.
Well, for those people that don't know me, I'm Officer Brian Jensen. I've been in the school district for 5 years now, primary at the high school and Renaissance School. I know it looks like you guys have a big agenda today, so I won't take up a lot of your time. But as far as the overview, what we had at the high school and the Renaissance School, every year we start by orientation of classes and stuff regarding several topics like student lot, driving behaviors in the student lot, trying to be friendly with our neighbors across the street. Those are the things that we talk about big time at the high school level. Also, sexting's huge. We talk about vaping. I'm in a lot of classes with talking about vaping and that type of stuff. Again, this year is the second year we did the mock drowning incident with a lifeguarding class in our high school, which is always kind of a neat thing. This also will teach valuable lessons of the students regarding how to call 911. Just be aware of your surroundings. Make sure you know exactly where the first responders need to respond to, how they, so I always quiz them a lot. So where are you at? Or what door do they need to go in? And things of that nature, so they have a better understanding of just knowing how everybody is at. We also bring EMS personnel involved in that too. They're willing to teach the students the proper CPR techniques, show them their equipment, and it's a really great learning experience for those students itself. Otherwise, I'm present to all the high school, a lot of the high school football games, hockey games, basketball games. I also part of the member honor guard with our department. You'll see me at the football game. We did an honor guard there. We also did an honor guard for the hockey game. We're open to do whatever too. So if there's teachers that are willing or other sporting events want us there, we can certainly take advantage of that as well. So, but just trying to think of anything else. You guys have any questions for me at all or anything like that?
Well,
Yeah.
could you just very briefly touch on how you establish and maintain and nurture relationships with the students? Because I know that's an important part of what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm in lunches at all the students itself. So I take part, I walk around the tables, talk with them, engage conversations, talk about everything. A lot of students come up to me. I always have an open door policy to it when it comes to my room. If I'm there, sometimes I'm not, just because I'm busy with other activities and stuff too. But they're more than welcome to come over my room, discuss whatever. It could be stuff that happened over the weekend or stuff that looking forward to. It could be anything. It could be some serious stuff too, and we get involved in that as well. But I try just to be very open front with them, let them know kind of person I am, and they're able to open up with me and have a deeper level of understanding between what my role is in the school district as well as what's expected from them while they're at school as well. as well. So it's just kind of a neat thing. I mean, I'm in all the dances, prom, everything. So they get to see my face all the time. I'm at the lock-in. I'm in there for a couple hours, so they see me all the time, and they really get to know me, and we establish a pretty good relationship that way as well. So.
That's impressive. All right, Chris.
Well, I want to thank you all for showing up in support of our SRO program. It means a lot. Well, good evening. I'm Officer Goffredson. I know a lot of the faces I recognize. And I'm a school resource officer as well, primarily covering the middle school and elementary schools. But we serve the district wherever we're needed. That's just where we primarily serve. I'm finished my 15th year in the position working in the schools. As the superintendent said, in a positive way, you're no spring chicken. And I agree with that. I probably won't be doing this forever, but I will be around next year for sure. My main role is to maintain safety, provide resources, and assist with education of youth. That's really what my job is. Some common training that I provide some of the students and teachers is about safety. I'm glad you're still, running the safety through the district because Nate does a very thorough, good job, and I appreciate that. I offer Halloween safety, health classes at the middle school, bike safety, a lot of miscellaneous topics like internet safety, whatever I'm requested to do. If it has to do with police, I will provide training and stuff and come into classrooms. My job is very proactive at these ages, and it should be. But obviously, at times, there are some reactive situations. I noted a couple things, that I had about 250 cases that I responded to and reported on last school year, which is really consistent with other years that I've been in the middle school and elementary schools, which is good, that it's maintaining some consistency. And that doesn't include my proactive presentations and other responsibilities. I gave approximately 100 presentations around the district last year. And that does not include my work with the safety patrol and other proactive duties, such as assisting buildings and grounds with safety and things like that. I think things are going very well with our SRO program here. And I'm very, very confident of that. Sometimes things are going well is when you hear from parents. Things trickle through the students to parents. And that's really impactful to me, and it shows that it's working when parents excitedly tell you what their children told them and what they learned from Officer G and how it's affecting these kids, and they're actually bringing the information home. I've had very supportive parents when interacting with families, which shows me that there's a trust factor that's been built over the years. Trust is built by being fair, dealing with issues that come up in a caring manner, always looking at the best interest of the kids. And I've mentioned this other years, that it's not the traditional law enforcement that's working in the schools. And it's a little different approach on when you're dealing with cases, even when children make mistakes, because they do make mistakes. But it's more about teaching them and figuring it out so it doesn't happen again. A lot of specific stuff I hear from parents after I give presentations. Freshly, I give 100 presentations throughout the school year, but just ending the year on bike safety, because that's one of the last presentations I do. I've had numerous parents come up to me in person and say, oh, my child was at a mountain biking training class, and when the instructor asked questions, they were all confident because they just had the information from Officer G and they wanted to tell the instructor what they learned and they knew the answers. Things like that mean a lot to me. Now, when I say I think things are going well here, because Brian and I go to local resource officer meetings, big rivers from Eau Claire to Chippewa to Menominee, Hudson, and surrounding area. We also go to an annual SRO conference every year where officers come from all over the state and even other states. And I hear very consistently that there's not alignment between the schools and the police department. Which is really important to me, because I think there's a certain philosophy that at least I bring to the position. And I think there's alignment between the school district buying into that philosophy, the people at the police department, and everybody seems to be on the same page when you don't get that all over. And I'm not bashing other places, but I think we really have it good here, and I'm thankful. And we talk about this a lot, Brian and I. We're thankful we work here where we do have that shared philosophy on how police should operate within the schools here. So I just want to say thank you, and it's not to pat Brian on the back or me on the back. It's because it's a shared effort. It comes from the school board, comes from Jamie Benson, who does an outstanding job leading, And the administration that we work with, because we work very close to with the administrators and decision-making and how we're going to deal with things, when we're involved, when we're not, to what capacity are we involved. So I really want to just say thank you for working at the school district and everything that you guys do to make our job so successful here in River Falls. So
Thanks,
thank
Chris.
you.
Stacy.
It's also, I think, important for people to know that this is a collaboration between the school district and the city when we talk about, and that's a really great thing that we can do that together. Alan?
Well, this is one of my favorite times, is to give you guys a chance to come in front of the board so we can thank you, because literally you're right. And my work with the State School Board Association has connected me with a lot of other school boards in the state. And this is a model program. And should we have police officers in our buildings? Yes, if they have a program like this, because it works. And the fact that Stacy mentioned that this is in cooperation with the city. City pays half the salaries, we pay half the salaries. So if anybody out there watching us tonight wants to thank anybody for this, make sure you also thank your city council member and the city administration as well, because they're supportive of this. We're fortunate here in River Falls. Not only in that, we've got this arrangement with the city. We've got 2 excellent officers. When you said 15 years, because I was going to ask you how many years, so that means for the second or third year in a row, you 2 are always at graduation. And I appreciate you being there, providing that security presence, et cetera. This is like the 3rd year in a row when those kids walking across the platform, you met them as kindergartners, right?
Yeah.
You met them as kindergartners. You've been here. They get to know you. They trust you. We've got excellent law enforcement in this community, and we've got good support for this, and it works because your job is preventative, and it helps us so much. And I don't know if people appreciate in this community the fact that we have police officers in our building. You hear all this conversation about should we or shouldn't we, and back and forth. Well, you can, and it works, and you guys make it work, and I appreciate that. I know the people in the community do, and certainly the police department does as well. So thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Next report is the superintendent's report.
Just wanted to give an update regarding our Project Oversight Committee, POC, that's related to a facility study and a relation to our work with LHB Architect and Kraus Anderson Construction Management Firm that completed a comprehensive facility study to help us both with short-term and long-term facility needs. The process for that committee has involved looking at a very comprehensive, lengthy, detailed list of all of our facilities. I like to say from the rooftop to the sidewalks and everything in between. And so part of that process is to narrow down what our priorities would be, because as you can imagine, some of those items include needs primarily, but some of them are also wants. And so where we're headed with the community engagement side of some of the decision-making is that in early September, we will be sending out a community survey. We're hoping to get a large number of returns on that survey, because ultimately we're headed in the direction of a February of '24 referendum. And referendums are decided by communities. They're not decided by a school board or a superintendent or anybody else. And so our job will be to try to define what we're hearing from you in that survey. After that, we'll have more community engagement, listening sessions and conversations. The board will get to a point where they will formally introduce what would be on that February ballot. And right now, frankly, the biggest debate I think that we're having, a couple of big debates. One is, obviously, whatever the ask is, you have to be mindful regarding tax tolerance. How much would supporters of some improvements to our schools be willing to support, because it comes back to your property tax bill. So that's what we refer to as the tax tolerance. So we got to be mindful of that. And then really there's 2 issues at play. One I mentioned with the facilities, and the other is just with our operational budget. So currently this district, basically our expenses are not keeping pace with the rising cost of inflation, and we're hitting the wall that nearly 2/3 of the districts in the state of Wisconsin have already hit and had to go back to their community and ask for operational referendum, nothing to do with facilities. And so that's going to be new territory for our community, and we need to explain that and talk about that in great detail and make sure that people are educated well enough so they can make an educated vote when they go to the polls in February. So we're going to do that, and the big kickoff for that community engagement will be in early September. You all will receive a survey, and I would strongly encourage you to take time to fill it out. Your opinion matters. Your opinion is going to have an influence on the future for the students in this district, and you're going to help steer the direction of what the board will ultimately put on that ballot. So stay tuned for that September survey.
Thank you. We are going to move on to action items. Before the board this evening is the June 19th meeting minutes. We also have bills that have been submitted for payment as well as employment recommendations. At this point, is there a motion to approve minutes, bills, and employment as presented? Thank you, Lindsay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. As we proceed now to action items under B, I'm going to call on Alan Techtenhagen, who is the chair of the Ed Program Committee, to give simply an update of what the Educational Program Committee discussed. Then I'm going to call on Jamie to give some background. Then I will take public comment, and then the board will discuss. So Alan, please.
Thanks, Stacy. So I chair the Ed Programs Committee, which as a policy-driven board, we typically start issues in our committees where we can talk about them, then bring them out to the board. And as we were discussing earlier, some of these for policies especially, there's 2 readings at the board. So we get pretty thorough conversation about this. At our meeting on July 10th, we had a good, very robust conversation, as we typically do. Talked about a number of things. One is we had a proposal from a teacher to take a trip to Italy and Switzerland with students upcoming, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, all of these things. Our elementary standard-based grading update, and Nate gave us a really good update on that. We had some good discussion about standards-based grading and how it's been going in the elementary school. And then we moved to act on the items that are listed below here. Academic standards notice, first reading on board policy for selection of instructional materials, curriculum review and development, the procedures for handling public complaints about instructional library, media center materials, first reading on transgender student policy, and finally first reading on bullying student and athletic, on bullying. We postponed the conversation about student and athletic handbooks for probably the August board meeting going forward. I think this is a lot to digest at once, and as we began to talk more about the policy issues here, I think we all decided we need to spend a little bit more time talking about this. Let's talk about the policies a little bit, and then the handbooks will follow, especially once we've acted on the policies. So what we're going to have here are items 1 through 8. The first one for sure will be pretty straightforward, and then each of these we can decide if we're going to take them one at a time. There's a couple of these we may want to group together. So before we ask for that, then Jamie, do you have some updates for us?
Yeah, before we segue into having the conversation regarding the policies more so than a trip to Switzerland or Italy, wanted to mention a couple of things. Tonight, I suspect that the board is going to have some reasoned debate. We'll also going to hear some public comments. We know how important it is to remain transparent in order to maintain public trust, and that's why you have board meetings in the public and not behind closed doors, and post your meeting agendas and display transparency. Don't just talk about it. So the board a year ago in June adopted a new strategic plan. With that was a mission statement and values. And among those values was included to be accountable and transparent in order to maintain public trust. So you don't just put those things on a piece of paper and embed it in a strategic plan. You try to live by that. That's part of what we're doing here tonight. The district, I want to also add, would never want a policy or a practice in the district to be perceived as hiding anything from parents. In particular, I'm only assuming that many folks are here in large part due to a transgender, gender diversity policy, maybe some other policy-related matters, but along that line, we've embedded new language. First of all, let me say that that particular policy has been in existence for 7.5, almost 8 years. It's not a new policy. And one of the key things that we've added to the policy because we thought it was absent was parent communication and transparency. So tonight, in addition to emphasizing transparency, we want to also display other district values like respecting the dignity of students, fostering a climate of civility and reasoned debate, and listening to community perspectives, embracing our diverse views and opinions as a strength in the process of developing important policies. There's my little stump speech. Now to segue that into a couple of legal considerations that are important as the board discusses policy. So anytime that you revise a policy, we need to understand not only what are the community values, at least do our very best to attempt to develop policies around what we think our community would want that policy to say. And at the same time, we have to understand some legal matters associated with those policies. So I wanted to share a couple of things. I've been asked by a few folks about what do the laws say about transgender and gender diverse issues and so on. What's the law? What's the law regarding restroom use? What's the law regarding locker room use? What's the law? And so, you know, Congress passes laws, and if among those laws there's a Title IX, Roman numeral 9, and that protects all individuals from discrimination based on sex. There's Title VII, it protects employees from discrimination on sex. Then there's regulations. So now I'm on a different topic, not the law. Now there's regulations. And within the regulations, the U.S. Department of Education develops regulations to implement the laws. They have the same force and effect as laws, these regulations do. Title IX regulations are developed by that Department of Education. Proposed Title IX amended regulations that are explicitly recognize gender identity are slated to be released, a new version, an updated version on their part, in October. We'll see if that happens. Then there's court cases. So you have the law, and you've got regulatory agency, and then there's things rise to the level of becoming a court case. And court case determinations are they're binding case law that has the same force and effect of laws and of those regulations. So an example would be the U.S. Supreme Court made a ruling, it's called the Bostock case, regarding discrimination on the basis of sex under Title VII that included gender identity. Quiz would be Title VII, that would be employment. The Seventh Circuit Court, which we belong to here in Wisconsin, there are 11 circuit courts in the nation. We are a part of the Seventh Circuit Court. And coincidentally, a school district in Wisconsin, the Kenosha Unified School District, a case was held that went all the way up to the Seventh Circuit Court regarding discrimination and sexual stereotyping on the basis of sex under Title IX, including gender identity. prohibiting a student from using a restroom the sex with which they identify violates Title IX and the Equal Protection Clause. There was a district court decision, Eastern District of Wisconsin, a federal trial court in the 7th District on July 6th, just a few days ago. A U.S. District Judge issued a temporary restraining order in favor of a student ordering the Mukwonago School District here in Wisconsin to allow a transgender student to use facilities that align with their gender identity. So I mentioned there's 11 of these circuit courts in the nation, and that we belong to the 7th. Around the nation, there's either 4 or 5 other circuit courts, federal courts of appeals, that have aligned with and said, we agree with that 7th Circuit Court decision in favor of transgender student ordering the Mukwonago Area School District to allow a transgender student to use facilities that align with their gender identity. So when the board develops policies, they have to embed what they believe to be community values. They also have some laws, regulations, and court cases that are binding in law when developing policies. I thought it would be relevant for the board, if not for the community, to hear a little bit about all that goes into policy development, especially in light of at least one of the policies on our agenda this evening.
Thank you, Jamie.
Jamie, have the other 7 federal courts taken any action or just nothing? So you said 4
Well,
agreed with.
yeah, it's either 4 or 5 around the nation that have. I'm aware of only one. There is one circuit court that did not rule the same as these others. It's a region of our nation that includes Florida. And I don't know the answer to if there's 4 or 5 plus the 7th that have ruled this way out of 11, and one has ruled not. I don't know about the other 5. Perhaps, to be honest, I don't think they have yet made any ruling.
And then this could go up to Supreme Court. My guess is this is going to be resolved at a higher level. So, that'd be my guess. I don't know.
So do you want to talk about the results of that suit? I think it's important for people to understand that when the suit came to the 7th District Court, that the court found in favor of the student who was wanting to be able to use a restroom that matches their gender identity.
Yeah, that's what a couple of these were.
That's what this says.
Kenosha was that 7th court case.
And so then the school district was ordered to be able to be in compliance with that regulation. All right, at this point, I am willing to take public comment about any of these issues that the board will be looking at under 6B. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes. And Amanda has the timer.
We want to go down the list, or?
Is that what that was?
We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Maybe some might have changed.
Please tell us your name.
Good evening. My name is Carmen Gillis, and I have 2 daughters in the River Falls School District. I want to address the transgender policy tonight, so I'm reading my comments to be succinct and respectful of the time. Also, it's a little nerve-wracking speaking to this board. In 2015, when the original policy was written, my oldest daughter was in 2nd grade. That same year, my husband and I were moving and made the decision to build in the River Falls School District instead of Hudson, where my stepson was attending at that time. We made that decision even though we both worked in the cities, and Hudson would have been much more convenient. Back then, I assumed our district was focused on striving to be the best academically, and I trusted our district and teachers to provide a quality academic experience for my daughters. In recent years, it has been heartbreaking to see what my girls are dealing with and exposed to in our schools. The insanity of behaviors occurring and allowed in our schools is not healthy for children to be around. The policy on transgender students states that the Board of Education supports safety and privacy of all students. There is no safety or privacy for my daughters when a male who has a deeply held and sincere sense, that's the board's wording, that he is now a female is in their bathroom or locker room. How awful for our girls to worry about a male being in such a private space. My girls deserve a quality education focused on academics when they are in school, and they definitely should not feel anxious about using a bathroom. Every student deserves a quality education, including our transgender students. I am hopeful our board will begin to focus on strengthening academics again in River Falls in the coming years, focusing on subjects like reading, writing, math, and science. River Falls is a beautiful city, and our schools are an important part of this community, and I'm hopeful we can all work together to make our schools better. And I just want to note that there's so many people out in the hall, and I feel badly. I think when we have these kind of controversial topics, we should move to a larger space so people can feel welcome.
Would anyone else like to address the board? Would anyone else like to address the board?
Good evening. My name is Jackie Nickham. I'm in the city of River Falls. At a recent school board meeting, it was suggested that those of us who attend and express criticism are being influenced by a national narrative, and I want to respond to that. Schools have implemented policies and practices based on state and national dictates. May I list a few? Common Core, No Child Left Behind, transgender policies, inclusion, equity, and diversity, social, emotional learning. And these nationally inspired policies are implemented in our local schools. State funding is tied to and dictates the implementation of these policies in one way or another. So yes, we are all influenced by outside forces. Consequently, these programs are leaving many parents with little choice but to take their children out of the public schools and either homeschool or enroll them in private schools. But let's bring that back to our local situation. The suggestion for a new gender-diverse student policy states that gender-diverse students are allowed to use the restrooms and locker rooms and/or showers that correspond to their gender identity. Are you suggesting that teenage boys and girls should be showering together in a common area? You're okay with that? Will girls feel safe going into bathrooms or showers when boys can walk in at any time? How about changing the policy so that it is fair to all students? They are all given two choices. You can use the facility that corresponds to your birth gender, or you can use unisex facilities. That policy would be fair to all students. No student would be singled out or embarrassed, and I can't believe that you would expect girls to shower with young men. Do the tax-paying citizens of this town have any idea that that is your plan for these schools? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brenda Larson. I have a recent graduate and 2 current students in the school district, and I'm here to actually support the work the board is considering on the gender diverse policy. So whether or not gender diverse students are acknowledged and their choices are affirmed in the River Falls School District, these students will continue to identify themselves in gender diverse ways. No school board ruling is going to change that. But if the school board doesn't put policies in place protecting these students, they will have to face going to school each day without the support of school policies and possibly without the protection and support of their teachers and peers. The research on this is really heartbreaking, showing high rates of suicide and suicide attempts, not for all gender diverse youth, but for unsupported gender diverse youth. So again, the stats are really high suicide attempts and rates for unsupported youth that express themselves in non-conforming gender diverse ways. As an advocate for safety and for high-level education for all of our students in the River Falls School District, I'm fully in support of what the school board is considering here tonight with the policy as I've seen so far. In addition to thinking about gender diverse students, I'm thinking about my own children. I want them to grow up with the knowledge that there is a tremendous amount of diversity in our world and that this diversity should be celebrated, not feared. I want my own children to know about inclusive language and understand the inclusive policies that they will almost certainly see in their future educational and work settings in a world that is much bigger than River Falls. And I want them to be prepared to go out into their post-high school lives with the character and knowledge of what it looks like to be respectful, considerate, kind, and inclusive to everyone they come into contact with. Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Willis Rivera. I have had 2 students come through River Falls schools. I have a daughter and a son who is transgender. My son was not transgender when going through River Falls High School, but is transgender and has been trans for a little over a year. So I want to speak to you about what support can mean and about what lack of support can mean. The statistics that the last speaker was talking about, the American Academy of Pediatrics stated that in their survey that they put out, over half of transgender students have attempted suicide. Over half. So if we're talking about safety for our students, over half of these students have attempted suicide. My own son has struggled quite a bit, and it is so amazing to see when he's affirmed. He's really lucky right now because he is in a graduate program where he's getting really good support in the sciences, no less, from his cohort and from his advisor. And where he is not getting it has been painful, and it has been hard to go through. And sometimes, even with counseling, even with calling me and having conversations, having some training in this area, it's been hard. It has been hard. I have had to talk him off the ledge more than once. So it's important to think about the safety of these students as well. Having someone call my student he or him, call my son he or him, is so affirming. When he went to his first class in graduate school, he said his name and he said, my pronouns are he and him. And nobody else in the room did that, which was surprising because in this particular class, that was something that was important. Sorry. But in another class, they did, and he felt so much more welcomed there. So I thank you for this policy. You will save students' lives. Thank you.
It is really nerve-wracking standing in front of everybody, so. I'm Kellen Wells Mangold. I am a resident. I have a soon-to-be 2nd grader and 5th grader in the district. I also have a perspective that not everybody in the room has, and that I have actually sitting in your chairs in the past. I was on the school board very briefly. I read the gender diverse policy, and I support it, especially since I read through the very shiny strategic plan that you mailed to all of us. It touches on goal 1, which is an equitable support system. 2.2 says behavioral expectations with core values, students first, people matter, equity and respect. Goal 2.5 talks about a system of support for mental health, as others have talked about. So in 2022, the Trevor Project did a survey of 34,000 LGBTQ youth, and those that had an affirming supportive system had lower rates of suicide attempts. 4.2 talks about an effort for EDI, fostering an inclusive environment. And then 5 talks about just having policies and operational efforts that focus on the many areas and for lots of different parties involved. So I feel like this policy does all of those things. You need to implement the strategic plan that has already been adopted. This hits on all of those points. I applaud the thoughtful effort of including the parental involvement that wasn't there before. And I feel it's really important as a parent who has 2 kids who they don't know who they're going to be yet, that they should be able to bring their true authentic selves just as all students should be able to. Their biggest headache right now is figuring out what they're going to build in Minecraft, but that may change in the future, and they should be able to be in an environment where they feel supported. So thank you very much.
I too have sat in your spots at the table too. I'm Tom Westerhouse, a retiree from this district, 10 years. I'm proud to be in the district. I'm standing in support of all of your policies that have been presented this evening, including the bullying policy, the instructional materials policy, choice of materials, the curriculum development process, and the transgender policy. I have worked on policies with some of you, and I've worked on them in a lot of districts, and I can tell the blood, sweat, and tears that have been put into this policy, and I thank you for that, and I can tell also that you've picked up on issues that have been raised to you, such as recently mentioned the parental input and so on. So I think you've done due diligence in presenting this policy, but I would just like to say on my own behalf that I really have always believed that public education has really 2 focuses. The first is to raise the entire common good of a community, and that includes students of all ages, including us oldsters. It really is important that education raises the common good. And the second part, and the courts and state and Supreme Court and Congress have all supported, is also the second part of the role of education is to help the vulnerable, those most vulnerable in our society and in our community. I started thinking about all the programs that we've been involved in here and other districts throughout the state where that's really other policies. Special education is about the vulnerable. Civil rights, diversity policies, hungry. We feed kids who come to us hungry. Low income, poorest families, single parents, divorced families, sports, the equity for boys and girls, as Jamie mentioned, equal opportunity employer for staff. The programs go on and on and on in terms of what is the responsibility of a school district to care for the vulnerable. And I think we've just heard of some of the vulnerable students that you have in this community and in your school district. So your policy is spot on in its desire to help those children. Thanks. Keep up the good work.
Good evening. I'm Mike Thompson, resident of River Falls, former school board member, so I can identify with the process you're going through. I read all of the policies and the proposed changes, and I think they are excellent. I was so compelled by them that I wanted to come here and just thank you and convey my opinion that they're really excellent policies. And this is really something that's special to me because I am a parent of a gender diverse child. We have 2 kids, both went through this district, and so I can identify firsthand what it's like for those students and children and people as they get older and graduate and become adults. To be in that, in that situation. I would also encourage you, and maybe there's an element of this that I should know about and I don't remember it, but I would encourage you to be mindful of really educating the whole district, not just the residents, but the teachers and staff of these policies, because I really see these policies as tools in a toolkit that teachers and staff have for helping students be the best that they can be and do the best that they can do. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Angie Branham, resident of River Falls for coming up on 20 years. I have a student at the River Falls High School, and he is gender diverse. And I love him with all my heart, and I wanted to speak to just some of the language. I wanted to make sure that you on the board knew just a little bit about the very specific language that's needed. You've been poring over it, I know. The language of biological sex is different than gender identity. And so gender assigned at birth, it's not something that is very clear. Making the distinction between sex assigned at birth and gender identity is much more of a clear separation between those two definitions. So thank you for the policy. Thank you for the thought and work that's gone into this, and best of luck.
Lumping along. I'm Donna O'Keefe. I'm from River Falls Township, and I also want to address some issues with the transgender policy. Just to clarify, I don't have any problems with having a transgender policy. One of the first things, though, I did want to point out was the difference between a gender assignment and biological sex assignment at birth. There is a difference, and it probably should be biological rather than the gender assignment comes excuse me, by choice. The only other thing that I want to clarify from speaking with a number of parents is that it seems that I don't think most people have a problem with having the bathroom policy there. It's just that there isn't clarification on how you're going to implement that. Other schools have dealt with this all over the country. And so what exactly does unisex mean? How are you going to remodel and create new facilities, locker facilities, so that there's more privacy involved for the students that are concerned about it? Or are you just going to make do with what's in each facility? That's one of the biggest concerns. And the other concern that I have is some of the terminology that is, I'm sorry, I came in with all this stuff. The terminology in the support the student, the definition of will honor the student's request is somewhat unclear in that, does it mean that the request will be considered, or does it mean that that the staff will comply with it? Because again, that's a legal issue. It's been determined that you cannot compel speech in your staff or create a situation where employees want to resign or even limit their employment because of their belief system. So I just want to point that out when you're considering revision. Are those maybe some clarifications that need to be made? Thank you.
Nate, would you see if there's anybody in the hall? Mr. Sherman, would you see if there's anybody in the hall who wishes to address us as well?
Good evening. My name is Hal Watson. I live here in River Falls and have 3 kids that have gone through the school system. I have read the policies 3 through 8, and I just want to say how proud I am of this board, and I support the policies as you've rewritten them or drafted them. I think that these young people deserve our support, and I think you're on the right track. So thank you very much for your effort here.
My name is Janet Ellinger, and I live here in River Falls. I am part of a River Falls PFLAG group, which provides support, education, and advocacy for the LGBTQIA+, I got it out, community and their allies and families and friends. One of the things that we do are some panels in 5 area high schools, River Falls being one. And we go in, 3 or 4 of us, we do a little bit of education, and then we tell our stories, and then we take their questions and we have conversations with these students. Finally, this policy and whatever we do in the school district, the weight of it, the blessing of it, the dealing with it lies most heavily on the students. And so I'm going to share with you just a few of the comments, because we always ask the kids, fill out a little survey thing so we know questions you have and comments you would have. These are some of their comments. I'm not a non-binary masculine-leaning teen, too scared to come out. Y'all coming, talking made me feel more secure. Thank you. This isn't really for me. I didn't need it, but I'm sure it was really helpful to a lot of my classmates. Words can hurt. Everyone is different. Take pride in who you are. Don't judge people on appearance. Be nice. Be true to yourself. Be a good listener for your friends. This broadened my horizons. I learned ways to support my friends. This helped me. I've been in a dark place. You all helped me so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I think everybody in this room wants the very best for the kids in this community. So you and we have a lot of work yet to do, but I too want to thank you for your efforts. We've heard from some bumps in the road, so thank you and keep up the good work.
Didn't realize I was that short. My name is Vicki Cobian, and just real quickly, I've been a resident for 45 years. I think all three of my children went through public schools in River Falls. I've been a teacher here. I've been a teacher of middle school of 8th grade for a total of 24 years in 3 different towns, mostly New Richmond. So I'm well acquainted with middle school students. I have children, my own children, who have trans friends who've been in our home. I'm a volunteer right now at Rocky Branch and West Side, and there's so many things I'd like to say, but honestly, I'm humbled by the people who have already spoken. Those of you who shared your personal experiences, God bless you, parents who came up here, and really all of you who spoke so beautifully, so eloquently about something that's important to all of us, obviously. I guess my own children, as I was about to say, have humbled me and have taught me greater tolerance. I thought I didn't need that. I thought I had that. I thought I was always tolerant of differences in people. But when my own kids talk to me on this issue, because they have friends who are trans, they really make me see even better, even more clearly, how much I need to grow, how much I need to accept. Because I like to think of myself as a good person. And I won't use the word Christian. I've had there's been a lot of Christian involvement in my life. I don't think it comes down to that. I've noticed nobody else has used that word yet either, honestly. Let's just say good. Let's just say we want to, and many of us actually want to be Christ-like, okay? So whether you find that in Christian groups and Christian churches or whether you find it elsewhere, those values of compassion and tolerance and love for everyone, for humankind, are, I think, what most of us are aiming for. And that's certainly my goal in life. I want to say I've had discussions with relatives who use this language. Oh, dang. Okay. Say one more thing real fast. I can't imagine, I just can't imagine what it's like to be even a person who is gay, for example, or a person who is trans. I just can't imagine it. And they say it in a very rejecting way. We are called upon to imagine it. Okay? We are all called upon to imagine it, whether or not it's been your experience. I have a friend who just lost her husband. I've never lost my husband, but I can try to imagine it, can't I? And I need to. And that's what I think we all need to do with this issue. Try to imagine and be compassionate.
Hi. My name is Stacy Hansen. I have 2 daughters who just graduated from River Falls High School. Yay. And the transgender issue is very close to me. When my kids came home, probably in 8th grade, and said, look, we have a transgender friend at school, I had concerns. I, like some others, thought, oh, what would that be like? Imagine myself on a business trip alone, walking into a bathroom at maybe midway, by myself, and there's someone of the opposite sex in the bathroom. And I thought, oh, that would be scary. I wouldn't like that, right? And then I got to know this person, this transgender person. He spent almost every day for several years in my home with my kids. He almost became a 3rd child to me. And there is nothing that he wanted more than to walk into a bathroom of his gender. He was born female, was transitioning to male. He wanted nothing more than to be at the Mall of America, for example, walk into a men's bathroom, take care of his business like we all do, and walk out. That's what he wanted. And I think this policy is the right step toward that. Because in my personal experience, over years, in multiple situations, he wasn't trying to walk into a bathroom of people of the opposite sex and scare them and act like a boogeyman and, try to do something perverted. He wanted to go to the bathroom, walk in, walk out, and continue on his day. That's all he wanted. And I think this policy is a really good step toward that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Katie Kroll. I have 4 kids in the school district. I was not planning on speaking, so I have no notes. But as I listen tonight, I think it's so, I don't know, it just hits my heartstrings because I think when we might have a difference of opinion to say that, we don't want our kids showering in certain bathrooms with transgender, gay, or people with different sex orientations, we don't have compassion, or we don't have good hearts, or we don't want people to be inclusive or kind. Like, we are all those. I have a good heart. I'm a Christian. I have a gay brother. I have friends who are transgender. What I'm saying is I want all of us to be inclusive, which means all of our kids should feel safe. So when you're taking a minority and putting them in showers who are transgender, but they might be gay, or they might have different sexual orientations that they might still like the same sex that they're in the shower with, makes me feel uncomfortable. This whole topic has opened up great conversation with my 4 children, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the growth and opportunity to have these types of discussions. And this isn't about us as parents, it's about our kids. And my kids all had said this would make them feel uncomfortable. So now who's not being inclusive? That's what I would like to ask. Like, we need to be inclusive. What you mentioned earlier about saying, hey, let's open up bathrooms, do unisex bathrooms, whatever it needs to be. I want a solution, but I don't want my kids being the ones now being, singled out or feeling uncomfortable taking a shower. That's just what is inclusive. It's including all. But what we're doing is we're flipping it over now. So I would just challenge all of you to think of that. And I am kind. Everybody in here is probably kind, has great hearts. Just because we have a different of opinion doesn't make me less bad people. I'm shaking because I'm nervous. But I just open your eyes a little bit. And I think it's just it's not about us and our opinions and our political, whatever it is. It's about our kids. Talk to your kids about it. See how would they feel. Because I know darn well I would not feel comfortable if somebody who is trans, who looked at me in the shower because of their sexual orientation, looked at me and thought I was attractive. That wouldn't make me feel uncomfortable, or that would make me feel uncomfortable. So that's it.
You know what the answer is? One holder. One holder. One holder. That's it. No problem.
Ma'am, it's your turn.
Hi, thanks. My name is Cindy Kernahan. As of this August, I will have lived here for 24 years. I've had 2 children who graduated from River Falls, 2010 and 2017. I'm also a professor and an academic administrator. I wanted to thank you for the policies. I read through all of them, and I know how hard it is to write those, and I think they're well written. I think they're reasonable. I appreciate the expertise, the way in which you defer to the expertise of your teachers and others, and choosing curriculum, allowing for complaint processes. I think all of that is really good. I think also the transgender policy in particular is very reasonable. I think it's very well written. I think it allows for a lot of case-by-case consideration, which is very important. So I just wanted to thank you. I'm in favor of those policies, and I appreciate the work you put into it because I know how hard it is to do that work. So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Mike Mitro. I'm a parent of 3 students in the district, and firstly, I want to thank you all for all of the hard work that you're putting into considering the policy, the intention, and the thoughtfulness that goes into this. Language does matter, and so being open to considering how you frame the structure of the policies is important. But I also want to talk about, the lack of, like, so we're dealing in hypotheticals, I think, in a lot of these scenarios where we're looking at it from the perspective of worst case scenarios on some level. But we don't have all of the information yet, as the policy hasn't been put into force, if I'm not mistaken. Like there's a section of it that's been in existence for 7 years where the board is making some revisions to that, but the policy itself has been in force for 7 years. And to my knowledge, I don't know, there hasn't been any catastrophic outcomes from having that policy in place. So I'm suggesting that we view this through the lens of curiosity rather than resistance, and just see what happens. Like, I don't think the intent is for this to be the Wild West in the showers and in the bathrooms. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. In fact, I think it's the opposite of that, right? We're trying to make it accessible and supportive of all of the students and how they identify. But I think we had to take a step back and just view it through that lens of curiosity rather than resistance and see how this shakes out, because this is one of those inevitabilities, I think. Like, change is inevitable, change to policy, change to identity, change to social structures, and I just think it's important to take a step back and just wait and see, like, what happens next. Thank you.
I am that short. My name is Tanya Schmidt. I am a parent of a student who just graduated and also of a high school student still in this district. I too am in support of these policies. I feel like on some level there is a viewpoint that gender diversity is some sort of new crazy fad when it has always existed. Gender diverse people have always existed. They have not always had support, however, as has already been pointed out. And we know that language is a big part of that support. And the language that we use here tonight, and the language that is used in our buildings, and the language in your policies are showing learning and growth that are also a big part of living in an ever-changing world and society. And yes, there is some discomfort in getting used to gender diversity. There is some discomfort in getting used to the LGBTQ spectrum and moving into areas that many of us haven't had a lot of experience with. But when we are really on the path of the human experience, then we do move beyond simply being uncomfortable and learn to grow and learn together and truly welcome these lessons that are there before us. So again, I thank you for the language you've put forth in this policy, and I'm in full support of it.
I'm not that short yet. My name is Carol Motes. I've lived in the city of River Falls for like 47 years. I'm still working on being a townie, very hard. The issue of gender identity is not going to go away. And everybody has to accept that. But I can see why for some people it is an uncomfortable topic. It's something that is, each of us are on a different path to understanding what it is. And so what I would really like to urge people this evening is to accept that it isn't going away. It is throughout society, it's throughout many societies, and let's support the school board in making this work. Let's make it work for all of our children. And so we need all the voices to come to the table, but with that one purpose. And then I have every faith in the school district and the citizens of River Falls that we will make this work.
Hello, my name is Dana Cadjo, and I just took the microphone out. Okay, there you go. I graduated in 2014, and I've been hearing a lot from parents who are very concerned about their kids. Well, I was a student in the school district, went through the entire school system here, and I was on the swim team. I showered in those locker rooms. I changed in those locker rooms, and I just want to express my support for what you're doing, because it is incredibly important. And you're growing up, you're going through puberty, you feel uncomfortable no matter what's happening to you, and you're looking at people's bodies because it's great growing and it's changing, and that's just something that happens in life. Now, I also want to point out to an issue that hasn't been discussed, the one about the social studies trip to Italy and Switzerland. So I actually live in Europe. I've been living there for 5 years. I am intending on returning to Europe. I just want to make sure if that's passed, if that goes forward, that students who don't have the means but desperately want to go and experience the world and have a growth of person have the ability to do so, because it shouldn't just be for those with higher means. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the board this evening?
I'm going to start with minutia. First, if I may ask, why are we in the board and the language involved?
Can you introduce yourself?
Sorry. Moving from district compliance officer or district administrator.
Sir, what is your name?
Cameron Connors. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Cameron Connors. I am a resident and have a child in the school district. First, a question. Sorry. District compliance officer or district administrator has been removed for superintendent. What is the purpose of that or reasoning behind that?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
There are two different terms. You can
Okay.
call him a superintendent, you can call him a district administrator. It's
So
just
it's
for
ostensibly the same
consistency.
thing.
Yep.
Okay. So minutia, we'll go to that for that. But I think there's a lot of people who are concerned, and it seems like with the showering thing and stuff like that. But I would like to point out in the locker room and shower section, it very clearly says that what best meets the needs of both the transgender student and other district students. So if they're going to make accommodations, it would most likely be for both parties involved so that those are not uncomfortable students besides the non-gender conforming one. Second, non-minutia thing, my kids have friends who are not gender conforming. I've met other kids who are like this as well, and they don't care. So we're all getting into this in some sort of fight, and the kids don't care. So whatever most and best protects those individual students, I would say go for that. And that's, the kids don't care. But that's it.
All right, you all know me. So there's a lot of policies for a lot of comments. But I guess we'll stay with this one, the blue sheet here. When you build a policy, obviously you start from the bottom, you start with definitions, which you did. And I appreciate the definitions in this policy because transgender says a person assigned one way of sex or gender at birth, but in a binary system identifies differently. Thank you for saying we live in a binary system. That needs to be said. You said it. I appreciate that because there's a lot of confusion about that. We are in a binary system. Give me 100 people, take samples of DNA, you'll get only XX or XY. We're in a binary system. But thank you. That's what the policy says. We're in a binary system. Secondly, it says that gender expression, gender identity is a deeply held and sincere sense or psychological knowledge. So what you're saying is that a change in identity is psychological. Okay, I appreciate that too. So based on those two definitions, you built a system and you built a policy that I think we all agree we need one. Now, I can disagree with the bathroom. I don't like kids being exposed to people of the opposite sex, even though they identify. But aside from that, I really, really want to make this last point. And it has to do with the legal rights. And it talks about district staff will honor transgender students' request to be addressed by a chosen name or pronoun. What you're saying is, if they don't, they'll be disciplined. I'm asking David Bell, I'm asking the board, are you really prepared to discipline a conscientious objector, somebody who works on this staff or is ready to sign a contract, if they say, I cannot in good conscience call somebody by a preferred pronoun when I know for a fact they belong to a different sexual orientation? Are you willing to do that? Because I think you owe it to all the faculty and the staff to know where they stand if they make that objection and refrain from doing that. We have court cases across the country
It's been
that
2
have done
minutes.
that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
This is the up the sleeve one.
Hi.
I know.
I'm Patsy Werwe, and I'm a parent in the district with children at the elementary and middle school levels. And that was a perfect segue into actually why I came here today. Was I wanted to ask that perhaps we put in some definition and some acknowledgement of intersex humans, because 2% of humans are born in such a way that they do not conform to what we all believe is XY or XX. And so that can be a variation in their biology, in their genitals, and what's outside can be inside, what's inside can be outside. And so doctors may, in fact, assign them a gender at birth or decide, oh, there was an oops here, as has happened in a very famous case. And they, because the external genitalia was not, no longer looked normal, they decided to give the child a completely different gender and not tell him because he wouldn't know. Well, guess what? He knew he was a boy. So I think that's important for us to realize. This is not new. These are not new humans. This is human nature. And we should treat humans and children in such a way that helps them be able to focus on their own bodily needs, like using the toilets for what they're used for, which we all use them for, instead of thinking of them as some sort of peep show or, predatory manner. So I was so glad to read this because I'm actually really proud of this work that you guys have been doing. And I was just hoping that perhaps, and I think you kind of have it in there, but maybe go so far as to include intersex because, again, it's 2% of our student population.
Would anyone else like to address the board this evening? Okay.
Hello, David Hint. So I wasn't prepared to write anything or to present or anything, but with the policies and entirely all of them, I just want to.
Would you tell us your name?
Did you David Hint.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yep, HINTZ. So I'm a parent of two in the district. I'm a mental health professional. I'm a community member. A variety of hats. But one of the things that kind of speaks to me is really just the inclusion of this policy as well as like the other policies with the curriculum and some of that stuff in the inclusion because, so I am a gay identified individual. I've got, again, the two kids in the district. And with the inclusivity, it really matters, not only for the kids that are in our district, but the community as a whole, right? So we have conversations at home all the time about content and what families look like. So our family does not look like the typical family. And so that inclusion really matters for what that looks like. I'm also a sex therapist. One thing I think it would be maybe helpful and with the policies is also separating or defining gender identity versus sexual orientation, because they are not the same. And it seems like a lot of people get confused with that. This is just a side comment that maybe isn't necessary, but when we're talking about sexual orientation, if we're concerned with that in the shower, people are, I mean, I was gay in locker rooms. I was interested in boys. I was still in them, and still in the showers and the locker rooms with people. It didn't really matter. So the gender diverse policy wouldn't impact that concern. But I will say, even as my own personal experience, being in those showers was terrifying. Kind of like standing up here right now because I'm putting my whole stuff out there. Yeah, but in a nutshell, just again, huge appreciation for all of the things that the scoreboard does and the district here. As a mental health professional, I do work with kids in lots of different districts who are trans as well, and their experiences there are very different. So again, like, I can't express how much I appreciate it. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Julia Schmidt-Mischke. I just graduated this year. I wanted to say that I support this. It's very similar to the policies we've had when I was all in school. It worked well, nobody cared. It was great. And I would like to add that I would support the addition of intersex on there and the change of the word gender when referring to assigned sex at birth. Thank you.
I don't see anybody moving. All right.
My name is Martin Kretzman. I live in River Falls. I got 3 kids in the district. Wasn't going to talk tonight, regardless of what you might think. I think there's 2 things that I know to be true. One is what has already been said by several people here, which is this is entirely complicated, fraught with emotion. It's multi-layered, and it's certainly not going anywhere. I think that we can all agree on that. That's one thing that I think is very true. The other thing that I think is true is since I've been to more board meetings, town board meetings, township board meetings, city council meetings, county board meetings, school board meetings than I could probably count, I have a general distrust of anybody that's elected. I think that most of them are all liars. I think that they're mostly thieves. And so I go into these meetings with that heavy dose of skepticism. I've disagreed with a lot of things this board's done, especially regarding COVID protocols. I wasn't quiet about those things. What I am asking, I guess, because I think that you come into these meetings with decisions made. I think the public comments are part of what you have to do. And I would say thanks, but I'm not going to. It's a part of what you need to do to hear what people are saying. I think that you come in with decisions made. What I'm asking you is to prove me wrong. Like, I come in thinking this is all a bunch of garbage. I think that you know how you're going to vote. I'm asking you to pay attention to the law, which is what Jamie talked about earlier. Pay attention to what Wisconsin's doing, understanding that a lot of these laws are going to get overturned, they're going to get appealed. That's part of our legal process. But I got to get over some personal issues with trust. I know that myself. But my kids are a part of this, and so it's up to me to speak on their behalf and say, I'm going to do whatever I can to protect them. We all feel that way. And so on either side of this, we all think that way. So prove me wrong. Be thoughtful in your discussions. Be intentional in your discussions, and be deep in your discussions, and prove me wrong. Thanks.
Anyone else?
You know, I think,
Could you tell us your name, sir?
Chris Stolp. I think we're wasting a lot of time of segregating a certain minority. What we really need to do with our students and our community, regardless of where you fall politically or religiously or whatnot, is treat respect to everyone. You're fat, you're this, you're that, you're gay, you're lesbian, who cares? Be a good person. Respect each other. Don't be a bully. I've grown up with it. My son's grown up with it. And you know what? I don't care if you're gay, lesbian, or otherwise. Let's not single people out and say, oh, well, we need special accommodations for them. No, everybody needs a special accommodation to be respected and treated as a human being. Because my life is no better than yours or anybody else's. So I think that talking about the transgender people and whatnot, yes, okay, maybe they're been marginalized, but in doing so, it's reverse discrimination for other people too, because I've experienced that. I've been told, oh, well, you're just a straight white male Christian. Screw you, your opinion doesn't matter. I have defended my gay and lesbian friends and been persecuted for being a straight white male. So, you know what? Be nice to everybody. I might not like you. We might not get along, but you know what? Respect me and I will respect you. And let's come to the table, let's have conversation, and respect one another. That's all I have to say.
Anyone else?
My name is Cheryl Seachlog. I have 2 kids in the school district, incoming freshmen this fall, boy-girl twins. I think we're never going to make everybody happy. It's not going to happen. I think this gentleman nailed it on the head. Respect to everybody. I guess if I'm going to be completely honest, I know very little about transgender, and maybe a lot of you think I shouldn't be here because I know very little about it, and then that's fine. You're entitled to your own opinions. My main concern is my children's safety, and I just want to know more about how we intend to keep all of them safe. Specifically, are you saying that my 14-year-old daughter is going to be in the locker room with a potential 18-year-old male? No, that's not. I see this is, I'm asking, maybe I need some more things clarified for me so I can understand better. Because that's where my confusion is lying. So if someone could maybe help me with understanding this a little bit better, since this is my first board meeting. I don't know if there's anyone here who could help me with that, but understanding the policy a little bit better, that I would really like that.
Well, the board is anxious, thank you for your comments. The board is anxious to be able to hear from anyone who would like to address the board, but once this is done, we can actually get down to the work of the policy. So, I'm thinking we should go on.
Are we only talking about the gender issue at this point, or other issues?
We are talking about anything under 6B.
Okay, so, and I arrived late, so I didn't get an agenda. But I was St. Paul Public School Montessori teacher, had gender
Could you tell us your name, please?
Oh, Brenda Petta. I'm so sorry. And, our classroom was just as you described. People came to our class. They knew they were loved. They knew they were supported. Parents, at the end of my having their students, one cried because he wasn't going to be in my class anymore. I had others write me letters thanking me for all the support, that I gave the family during the time that their child was with me. So, but my concern is like yours, is let's have respect for everyone, and that means every family. And thank you, Jamie, for saying that transparency is so important. That's my issue. I would love to sit down with anybody in this class, in this room, and talk to you about what I have found in the library at the middle school. Because I think we could all agree that the books there, this address is 871. So is that in number 6?
We're talking about the policy.
871? Okay, so if this is in regard to 871, I would just like to question your inclusion that you must read a whole book. I met with Jamie in May. I think he was really shocked at some of the information I gave him on what is in some of these books. And, you know, I would just ask, before I met with Jamie, I read 3 books. I had 2 others on reserve that I hadn't read yet. It was very difficult for me to read the profanity, for me to read about the first time someone had oral sex, to read about a pedophilia, a father, stepfather raping his stepdaughter. I could go on and on, watching porn and detailing what was happening in the porn. I think we could all agree that an 11-year-old, that's not appropriate. And I would also like, because age appropriateness is often mentioned, I would like to see how that's determined. Because for my granddaughter at 11, I didn't like for her reading a book laced with so much profanity.
And so one of the things that we're going to do is to talk about the process that parents or community members would have if they have a question
And I
about
was
a book.
mentioning
So
some of the
we're
wording.
going to
I
get
was
to that
mentioning
tonight.
the wording too.
All right, are we ready to go on? Anybody else? Okay. So we are going to move through the recommended actions that we have under 6B, and the first one is to approve the preliminary grades 10 through 12 trip to Italy and Switzerland. Is there a motion for that approval, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Alan. Is there a second? Thank you, Mike. Any further questions or comments? We had a very extensive, I would say, was it certainly half an hour last time about what they were going to be doing, including talking about fundraising to make sure that this would be a financial opportunity for all of our students. So we have discussed that. Is there anything else on the board that you would like to have before we grant that approval? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. On an annual basis, the school board is responsible for approving an academic standards public notice. This also was discussed during the last Ed Program Committee. Is there a motion, please? Thank you,
Second.
Lindsay. Thank you, Alan. Further questions or comments about this?
This is an annual process.
It is? And it helps, it designates the standards that we are going to be teaching within our schools and that are reflected in our curriculum.
As set by the state.
Anything? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion is carried. All right, now we are going to move on to looking at the first reading of revised school board policy 361.1 related to the selection of instructional materials. School board members, this is on page 30. I've got so many here. Jamie, do you want to make any comments about this policy before we get going?
Let's see. Of late, haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at this one, to be honest with you. I was occupied by another policy in recent days, but essentially, there was really just some improvements that we wanted to make that basically outlined the process for how we select our instructional materials. We define in here, there's core instructional material, and then there's supplementary. The core, as this policy reads, explains that, you know, there's this sequence from one grade level to the next, and within certain subject areas that we want to require more of a district level oversight into that curriculum, whereas supplemental means that teachers have some flexibility to add to that core instruction. We make a special note to say, you know, but you got to be careful when you do that, because as you're bringing in supplemental material, we don't want you to deviate too far from the agreed upon core standards. We need to stay the course with what your department, your teacher team, and the collaborative efforts in developing the core curriculum that was established. We give some guidelines, I guess you could call it. We talk about things to keep in mind in the general criteria for selecting materials, things that we should be reminded of when we're making those selections. Probably the most significant change, I think, in this policy really would have to do not only with some of those additional pieces of what to look for in that process, but we're detailing that recommendation to the superintendent is made and to the Board of Education based on the involvement of that selection committee. And so ultimately, in other words, whatever, let me use this example. If at the elementary level, we're going to select a completely new math series, a completely new English series, ultimately, there's groups of staff that work on that selection, but it comes before the board for final approval. I don't think that's my Reader's Digest version of those revisions.
Is there a motion at this point to approve the first reading of revised school board policy 361.1 related to the selection of instructional materials?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Cindy, for the second. Any further questions or comments?
I think it was Mr. Thompson who asked this question, and it might be worth answering at this point as we move forward with all of these policies. But I think his question was, are these policies being shared with staff members, and how are they being advised and informed as to how these policies will be implemented? So does somebody want to just share?
Yeah,
what
I
that
remember,
process
I don't
looks
even
like?
have it up on my computer right now, but I remember there's a part in there that talks about once that determination has been made, that appropriate training would be provided to staff, and certainly staff that would be involved in the selection would be informed of the policy as they begin that process. The district has developed a new curriculum cycle that solidifies in a more formal sense how we go about that process. It's kind of a 6-stage cycle, and we've had a presentation to the board here in recent months regarding how that process will go and the involvement of people along the way in developing the curriculum. But so, yes, people would be well informed, our staff would be well informed of the policy, and again, there could be some associated training requirements that go with that, and obviously purchasing and so on that follows, purchasing the materials, the textbooks, the resources, et cetera.
And many of these are in their handbook as well, correct?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know that this, is it, that one is?
It also referenced.
Purposefully weighted, so if it is what is the current policy now, but when it is updated, then it will also be updated in the employee handbook. But we'll need to go a step further than just tossing it over the handbook. There'll be more work to do than that.
Well, and I think, because that's a good question, Lindsay, but it's in this district, us as a board and our expectations of the administration and of our faculty is we don't play gotcha. And that wouldn't be part of our way of going about stuff. So we wouldn't want to just wait until somebody did something and then go, gotcha. There's conversations that go on all the time. I've sat in on some of those meetings. I know the communication that has to happen between the principal and the faculty members within their departments and the administrative team on down. I think our expectation of a board is that we don't get to this point. And there might be a point, might be in a unique instance where we have it, but I think we've got the safeguards in place that would minimize that. But at a certain point, yeah, probably this could reach a standoff, but I doubt it. And I doubt that we couldn't work through this sort of thing with proper expectations and training up front.
Anything else?
We've had pretty substantial conversation about this. This is not a new policy or coming new, so the fact that we aren't having a lot of conversation about this tonight doesn't mean we haven't talked about it quite a bit.
It means we did our homework in ed program. So, anything else? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Now we are going to turn to the first reading of revised school board policy 330 related to the curriculum review and development. And so when you look at this, this is a policy that was passed initially in 1991. Allison, maybe did you do this one then? Probably. But it's been reviewed several times and revised. The changes this time are relatively minor. What we are looking at is a cross-reference to 361.1, as well as a new reference to our curriculum review cycle, which is now going to be 6 years in terms of this comprehensive cycle compared to 5 years. And then it links the actual process that we will be going through in terms of reviewing our curriculum. So it's relatively modest in terms of the adjustments. The adjustments are directed to changes in how we are doing business. Is there a motion, please, that we approve the first reading of revised school board policy 330, curriculum review and development? I'll move to approve. Thank you, Lindsay. Allison, was that you?
And again, just to comment, I think one of the biggest things with this, and I'm looking at Nate with this, but the work that's been done in this last year is, it looks like we're moving from 5 to 6. The larger changes here, we're structuring a calendar so that this is going to happen more certainly on a regular schedule. We had it on a schedule, but it was not as regular as we'd want it to be. This really, the schedule and the work that's been done this last year really lines this up so that we're in a much better position to review these in a systematic way as they come forward.
We'll be very deliberate.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. All right, now we are going to look at the first reading of revised school board policy 871, the rule for procedures for handling public complaints about instructional and library media center materials. So, I think that while we look at this, let's also look at the next document, and we can take the next two together because one is the rule and one is the exhibit. So, there are some changes here. We recently, what was the last date that we looked at this? Just a year ago. So this is an example of how the board comes back every so often if we do feel as if we need to be able to make an adjustment. Most of the changes are to make it clearer, to be more precise in terms of what the process would be. I think I'll take a motion and then we can have discussion. Is there a motion to approve the 871, the rule, as well as the exhibit?
Second.
Cindy, thank you, Bob. All right, some things that we should specifically point out. Nate, do you have anything? Ellen, Jamie?
I just add that with the process, in the event that someone makes an appeal or a complaint regarding instructional or library materials, that really the meat of the revisions involve that process and providing greater definition than what had previously existed in the policy. We define the process of the review more thoroughly, and frankly, the weight of the people included on the committee that were reviewing the complaint has been more equally balanced to include fewer educators, fewer school employees, and more parent community members at large. I would say those would be the two most substantive changes, defining the process and adjusting the committee makeup.
And on the exhibit, an important addition is that in order for any reconsideration process to begin regarding materials, people who are making the request have to confirm that they've read or viewed all of the material.
I just one additional comment, Stacy, just on where did this come from? We've been talking about this for several months now, and to a large degree, what this does is it cleans up language on a policy so that when we have the expectation that our staff follow the policy, we've gone back in, looked at the policy, and cleaned it up more so that we're more comfortable with this policy. And I think it's more specific. I think it is clear to parents, students, teachers and administrators all the way around, and the form that goes with it. So I think this is the result of a lot of conversation and a lot of time, so it looks pretty straightforward to me.
And it might be beneficial, Stacy, to point out to some of the people in the audience are people who have brought these concerns forward in the past. From my perspective, the biggest change in the policy is that we are guardians of the process. And the Board of Education will ensure that an appropriate process of selection of materials by people who are trained in education, that's where the buck stops. And we will guard that process. People have certain right to appeal, and in fact, people have pointed out things that do need to be looked at, and that's perfectly legitimate and should be done. But what we don't want to do, and what has been removed from the policy, I think the policy clarified, is that this group of 7 elected people aren't going to vote on book by book. Is this going to be in or is that going to be out? We're going to oversee the process and ensure that a good process is in place that supports good education and input and questioning from the community. But it won't be politicized by elected people, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Anything else anybody would like to bring up and highlight? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. All right, now we are going to turn to the first reading of revised School Board Policy 411, the rule related to gender diverse students. We also have 411.2, they're linked, regarding bullying and cyberbullying.
And we should point out too, when we're doing this, this is first readings, we're voting to approve first reading.
All of these are first readings, correct. Yep. Yep. So, this is where many people have had questions, and so I think it's important for people to realize the latest one that is hot off the press is blue. And I gave mine away, so could somebody send over a blue one for me, please? Two. And
Three, yeah.
Three.
there were some, I could tell in some of the comments tonight that there are some misconceptions about the content of this policy. So before we begin discussing, I am going to ask you, Jamie, if you would be willing to help us to go through, to recognize what's here, I'll do it with you, so that we're very clear about what it is.
Well, I'm going to avoid trying to wordsmith any more on the definitions, but we're taking notes with some of the feedback earlier. Just to back up a second, it's been referred to a couple times. This is not a new policy. This has been around for 7+ years. These are revisions. I'll tell you how it started. The fact that this even really originally landed on our radar screen is there was a case in the Sun Prairie School District in Wisconsin where a person that was born a boy, apparently, as the media reported this, hopped in the shower with 3 or 4 girls. And I had a board member bring this to my attention. I said, oh, I haven't heard that one yet. We better look into it. And as we looked into the Sun Prairie story, we obviously then turned to our board policy, and we recognized that we had nothing in there that said the word showers. Didn't say anything about it. Talked about restrooms, talked about locker room, didn't say anything about showers. And so in addressing a couple of perceptions that I've heard tonight, I can tell you right now that the spirit and intent of this policy does not intend to have a person who's born a girl hop in the shower with 3 or 4 guys. That's not the intent of the policy. And there may be people here that have a differing opinion on that. There may be people that think that we can't draw those kind of lines, but I'm just trying to be as transparent as the day is long to say that there's a process in this policy that addresses that shower issue, and it outlines options to be considered, and it says that ultimately administration is going to make a decision on which option we're going to go with. I can tell you right now that the option is not going to be that we're going to run into a situation like Sun Prairie did. Period. Drop the mic, end of story. Not happening. If you want to differ on a restroom topic, stick to your commentary on that, but let's not suggest that this policy suggests something different than what it's intended to, in particular regarding the showers. So we have a section now that talks about supporting the student that was not in the old policy. Talks about in that process, we want to play it out, play the scenario out. A student comes, talks to a principal, administrator, counselor, is looking for some support, so that section talks about how we're going to go about doing that. The other next section, parent guardian communication and or consent, also is an addition to the policy. Previously, we were silent on that issue. We didn't say whether we're going to talk to the parents or not. We didn't intend to say that we weren't going to do that. The policy was absent of that. And we felt it was important for us to be very deliberate and purposeful and put language in this policy that talks about how we have every intent in doing so. That we want to continue to be partners with parents as we do every day on any other topic. This is no different. I mentioned in my opening comments before we heard from community members that the last thing we would want is for any policy, this one in particular, to be perceived that we're either writing policy or that we have a practice that we're hiding things from parents. I'm hoping that you don't see anything in this policy that would suggest that. We added a paragraph regarding the legal rights. I made reference at the beginning of our meeting regarding some case law and discrimination policies. Whether we all agree with them, don't like them, it's the law. Period. So then we get into names, pronouns, restroom use, locker room, and showers was added there. Again, these options that are discussed about how we're going to do our very best to find an appropriate accommodation. Somebody pointed out that we also placed in this policy, if I can find it,
What are you looking for?
that a part of these considerations, we're going to include everybody at the table. What's best for everybody? And that, if you really want to play out options, which we don't have time for tonight, and nor is this the time or the place to do it. But if you were to play out a scenario where, I'll say this to the board right now, within this policy, if you play it out in practice, so there's a student that, let's say they're a high school student, they go to their counselor, they say, listen, I got to talk to somebody, I'm in this situation, I'm transgender, I'm gender diverse, whatever their choice of language is, I need to talk to somebody about it. The very first question that I think that should be asked would be, where are your parents at with this? Have you talked with your parents? Have you engaged your parents in the conversation? Needs to be the first thing that we try to solicit. We try to encourage. We try to facilitate. We try to help the student navigate that conversation. And so, I don't know if you need me to go through in more of a sequential step, but the last thing I'll mention, because of some, Amanda, when did you put this policy out on board book where it would have been public? So if anybody saw Friday's version, Saturday or Sunday, the blue piece has been revised as of, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe 5:55 this evening. And it's an attempt to do so by hearing not just some input from individual board members, but also from community members that have outreached, from no less than probably 7 different conversations with one attorney who is respected in the field and considered to be an expert in this department, conversation with other professionals at the university that have knowledge and expertise in these matters. And so on one hand, I'm apologizing for the fact that what was posted on Friday is different in version blue, which is now blue is posted on our website. Yep. It's not intended, that was never intended to present something on Friday and show up here with something different. It's just that there was so many revisions, and I tried with this blue version to uncomplicate it, to not have as many strike through and paragraphs that were completely stricken from the old copy to the new version. And for transparency, we brought copies, and if you didn't get one, there is a full copy of the pre-existing policy, the way it was before we ever touched this one. If you want to see it and lay it side by side to the blue, instead of trying to figure out all the revisions that have been made here, there, and everywhere, that would probably be my suggestion to do that, if you are so inclined.
So because the bathroom issue and the showers, I think, are the things that came up the most, let's make sure that everybody's really clear about what this proposal is. On the top of the second page, it talks about the legal rights of the student. And so that is what is occasioning our suggestion, or the way that this is written, that students, all students, are welcome to use a bathroom that matches their gender identity, that they are the ones that are choosing that because that is their legal right that is supported by case law. We do have unisex bathrooms available in all of our buildings, and so that every student, every person would have that option. When you look at the locker room and showers, this is where there is some difference. So at this point, what would happen will be a meeting where we can ascertain what the needs of the students are and how we would be able to best meet those. You'll see in listed 1 through 5 at the bottom of page 2 that there are some of the options. Using a private area within a public locker room, bathroom with a stall door, privacy, a curtain. There'd be a separate changing and/or shower area in a private area. Use of an alternative private area. And access to the locker room corresponding to the student's sex assigned at birth. There would be access to the locker room corresponding to the student's gender identity. All of this would be options that would be determined during a conversation that would meet the best, that would aim to meet the needs of all of our students.
So not just gender diverse students.
Correct. Any student. And all of those would be taken into account. Something else to highlight is that this policy now says that we will be in compliance with WIAA athletics in terms of what those expectations are. And so if they adjust, we will adjust as well, because that is what our policy is linked to.
The language under that athletic section was previously listed a bunch of the language from the WIAA. And we just eliminated it and wrote it generic as a reference to WIAA. In the event they change something, we follow that plan, that guideline, those rules.
It keeps us up to date. Are there other things that we should highlight here? It also talks about the board's expectation that students receive age-appropriate learning opportunities regarding sex-based harassment and how to prevent it, just like we would do with all forms of harassment.
You know, Stacy, I think the most fundamental thing is we need a policy that follows the law. Number one, we're a policy-based board, and we need a policy on this that's clear and easy to understand, and we need one that follows the law. And regardless of what anyone might say about how we ought to push the envelope and challenge the law or go against it, whatever, I'm not going to spend this district's resources fighting a federal court case. There's going to be plenty of other districts and people around there who are going to be fighting over this one. For right now, we need to, going forward, we need to be sure that we're compliant with the law. We're attentive, first and foremost, to the needs of our students. And that we continue to watch this and monitor this, because I suspect this won't be the last revision that happens to this policy in the years to come here. So when I see things like under restroom use, unisex bathrooms are available to all students at any time. No student will be compelled to use a unisex bathroom or a gender-specific bathroom for any reason. That what appears to be to some people a simple solution will just say to those students, you have to use the unisex bathrooms. the federal court's telling us you can't do that. You can't require that. So we can't break the law by doing that. So right now, that's why we're saying these things.
Furthermore, if I may,
Yep.
in that Kenosha case that I mentioned earlier, that the Seventh Circuit Court made a ruling on, that decision involved the Kenosha Unified School District paying $800,000 and required the district to grant the student access to the facilities consistent with their gender identity. To your point.
Could cost a lot of money. It costs a lot of time and effort and distraction to it. So I don't want to minimize any of this. I think that right now we need to conform to the law to the best of our ability, but also understand that the needs of our students are important here. And I think we had some really good comments here tonight from everybody. I mean, I'm really struck by the sincerity of the comments tonight, and I really appreciate that. Everybody here is about the kids, right? Looking out what's good, best for the kids. One of our challenges, of course, is we got 3,500 kids in this district and almost 18,000 people that live in this district, and a 7-member board and an administration here. We're not all going to agree. So this is what, we're supposed to do the best we can with what we've got, and we're trying to do that, and that's why we like hearing and getting the kind of input we are tonight, putting the kind of work into it here. And is this going to be perfect? I don't think it's perfect, and we're probably going to have, like I say, some more revisions in the years to come on this. One of my challenges, though, is lots of conversations about parents, and Jamie knows because I've talked to him a lot about, let's make sure parents are in the know on this. As a parent, what would I like to have been called about my kid? That's a very parent-centric attitude, and I get it because I'm a parent and I'm a taxpayer and I'm the adult and I should do that. However, it's also important for us to know that not every kid in this district has 2 functional parents and a nuclear family that makes these kinds of decisions together. And what about those students? What about those students who are terrified that their parents will find out because they'll kick them out of the house, literally kick them out of the house, which has happened. Okay, in this district. What do we do with a student who has divorced parents who absolutely not only won't agree on this, but choose this to be one more opportunity to fight and put the kid in the middle and not come to resolution, et cetera? That's not arguing changes in this policy. That's to say that simple solutions end up being very complex, just like everything else, because it doesn't sound like every kid doesn't have the same environment about here. So for those parents who are involved and engaged, they need to be involved in a very constructive way. And for those students who are at risk because their parents are not engaged, or maybe they don't even have parents who are engaged, or who are homeless, because we have students and have had students who are homeless here, who looks out for them? And that. So as we talked about, I think Cindy mentioned this at the last meeting, regardless of what we're dealing with here, this is policy, and it's pretty cold language when you stop and think these are students' lives that we're dealing with here. And it's hard, and it's not easy. So whatever we vote for, whatever we come up with here, isn't going to be perfect. But I hope it gets us in the direction of looking out for what's best for our students.
Allison?
May I make a motion?
Yes, you may.
Sorry. I move that we approve for first reading School District Policy 411, Rule 3, Gender Diverse Students.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Cindy.
And I do have a couple comments.
Please, this would be a good time.
Okay. First off, I totally agree. We had 35 people speak tonight, and with incredible passion and really some really good insights. Gender diversity is something, even though I've grown up in in healthcare and had all kinds of experience, I just don't know a lot about. I don't feel like I can wrap my head around it. But as Vicki Cobian so eloquently said at the microphone, that we need to imagine. We need to put ourselves into this and try to understand it. So I really appreciate all the perspectives from everyone. And a few things that I wrote down that maybe we need to look at in the policy. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to talk into the microphone. Number one, on the definitions. Do we have the right definitions? Someone mentioned intersex people, gender assigned at birth. I'm not 100% sure that we have the right definitions here. We have gender identity. We have that right, and I think they look fine, but I'd be interested in understanding a little bit more about what were people talking about. And then from some of the comments, it's pretty clear that, and it's not unusual, it's not abnormal, but that there's a fear of gender diverse people a little bit. And in the comments of, I wrote it down here, just the implication that a transgender person who is in the shower or the locker room of the people of their gender identity, that somehow they're a danger in that locker room, that they're dangerous to others who are, I'm going to use the example of someone born male transitioning to female in the female locker room, that somehow that person is dangerous to others. I don't believe that's true, but obviously there's people who believe that that's true. And is it? Is it true? And so then, too, kind of like our position is we're all good people, we're all nice, we're all welcoming, we're all accepting of everyone. I accept transgender people, I accept gender diverse people, but I don't necessarily want my kids to know they exist or see them or be exposed to them. I don't want it to be out there, and that's fear. It's fear behind that. And so what do we do about that? So we have this policy, but I was thinking, do we need to be doing more in our community to understand? I was really, really impressed with some of the stories I heard, some of the things I didn't know about, some of the people in this room who I know pretty well, which was really, really helpful. So just thinking, how can we address the fear? And maybe that's a little separate from the policy. And then lastly, there was a question earlier about pronouns, that the policy requires that faculty or staff employees use the pronoun of the, well, what does it say here? District staff will honor a transgender student's request to be addressed by a chosen name and/or pronoun corresponding. So district staff will honor. And the question was then, are we ready to, in somehow way, shape, or form punish staff who would refuse to do that, who would say, I have a conscientious objection to that and I'm not going to call you by your preferred pronoun? And I think the answer to that is yes. Yes, that we would be prepared to do that, but we should probably also, clarify that.
Yeah, in closed session, the school board would probably have some conversation about another Seventh Circuit Court decision, for those taking notes, referred to as the Klug versus Brownsburg Community School, in which that school district encouraged an employee to resign. They did. They sued to get their job back. The court said, nope. You're discriminating.
Right. So between reading one and reading two, just to wrap up, but yeah, I agree. Maybe we just need to look at those definitions and clarify, or do we have the right definitions?
That was going to be my recommendation as well. This has been reviewed. It's been reviewed by our attorney, but it could be that we need to make some adjustments in the definitions or even expand the things that we're defining. And so that would be a very appropriate thing to ask administration to do prior to a second reading. While I hear you, Allison, about the fear issue, I'm not sure that that's something that we would specifically address in this policy. Yeah. But I do think that highlighting the definitions would be wise.
I think, too, in addition to fear, there's another element of the emotions for others there where it's just, it's uncomfortable. It's not necessarily fear-based, and I think we all need to hear that and understand that, and that's where, in practice, in accordance with the policy, administration would work with families, with the student, and make every effort to make sure that whatever alternative, as we outline these options, that we find the happy middle ground.
I think, as you were speaking, Allison, first of all, I want to echo what you said. I appreciate all of the comments and everybody that was courageous enough to stand up and respectfully express their opinions, their experiences. So thank you to everybody who's here. Clearly, this is something that our community cares about, and so thank you for that. Regarding the comment about fear, I think in my mind I frame it up as maybe concern. That I'm a little bit more comfortable using that, and I think the reason I would say concern is because part of the reason why we are looking at this policy in particular is because there was a situation in another school where a student did take advantage of a policy and made some female students very uncomfortable. So maybe not fear, but perhaps concern. Yeah. The other thing I'm particularly interested in, and I would actually like to continue the conversation with administration, would be the compelled speech piece of this. And I think it is an interesting point as a school district, if our policy is going to be that we expect staff to use the preferred pronouns or names in this situation where you have a conscientious objection of a staff member, how will we navigate that? And Mr. Benson, you mentioned one school district in our state. I know there's a school district in Virginia, I believe, who fired a staff member who was not comfortable using the preferred pronouns. He sued and was reinstated in his position. And so the law sided with them. So I only point that out to say, once again, this is very complicated. This is new territory. And there's not a lot of things that are completely settled at this point. So I appreciate everyone's recognition of that we are grappling with this and weighing a lot of different factors. And so we appreciate your patience and your understanding of that.
And I'll reiterate my comment to that was that I think the school board would go into closed session to discuss the matter, and that part of that discussion would be one of these court cases. We probably would talk about another one or two. And so I did not say anything more than there would be a closed session discussion on the matter. That is all that I said, just for the record.
Right, but the policy does say.
It does.
But the policy does say our employees will respect the request of the student.
It does, yep.
Yeah.
We'd also have our employment attorney consulted on the matter too before.
14 times.
Yeah, no, but I mean, on the pronoun.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Only 13 probably.
Yeah,
if
13
we
for that, yeah.
faced with that.
Yeah.
Are there other comments or questions on this?
Can we discuss dress code? I see
Yes.
we've got,
Because we didn't do it enough last year. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, thank goodness.
that was the last thing on the list.
Anything else from the board? And so,
I want to
Mike?
say just how impressed I was that community folk came out and spoke, and the difference of opinion and the kindness, I think, that we saw tonight was.
I would concur. I was impressed.
Yeah.
So what we have before us tonight is a policy that's been moved and seconded. We have already identified the definitions as something that we would like to review one more time before it comes back for a second reading. Anything else?
So I just want to share a little bit of a personal narrative here, if you can bear with me. So I have really grappled with this particular policy. I've gone back and forth with Mr. Benson, who has graciously engaged in some really wonderful conversation. And many of you recognized his involvement and his desire to serve this district well. And it's evident in the way that he has navigated the writing of this policy and the conversations he's been willing to have. I am getting hung up on something that really wasn't actually mentioned, I don't believe, much this evening. But I am uncomfortable that this policy, that we could find ourselves in a situation where a student expresses a desire to begin socially transitioning at school, but does not wish to tell their parents about it. And I wish, and I would want the language to be stronger there, particularly regarding names and pronouns and the restroom use. I feel really strongly about parental consent. And I know a couple people maybe shared the higher rates of anxiety, depression, suicidality. And I believe that in a situation like this, parents should be aware that their child is grappling with this. I know we have a note at the bottom of page 2 that talks about exceptional circumstances that perhaps that parental consent would need to be excused or suspended for the time being while we wrapped other resources around this particular family. But I am concerned about the potential implications where a student would not want their parents to know what they're dealing with. I worry about the potential burden that would place on staff members that feel as though they have to keep this secret from the parent. And so just my own personal conscience really struggles with that and makes it really difficult for me to support this policy going through. That being said, Mr. Benson went to great lengths to point out our desire to include parents and encourage the student to speak with their parents, but ultimately the decision is left with the student, and I struggle with that a lot.
So,
Can I ask a question, Jamie? So obviously you have the paragraph up front that, you're going to sit down with the student or the school administrator and obviously encourage parental involvement and, help the student with that and coach them up on involving parents, right? When would we absolutely require parent involvement for anything? For
Showers and
Yeah,
locker rooms.
I'm just clarifying.
Yeah. It's just showers and
locker rooms. How about changing the school records?
That's legal.
That's
Unless-
illegal.
legal.
unless they're-
At age
Changing the school
14.
records.
The student goes to court to have their name changed.
So showers and locker rooms, not bathrooms, not pronouns, just to clarify. Right? We
And-
wouldn't absolutely require it. Obviously, we would be engaged. And then I just have a question too. We've had several transgender, or kids transition under our roofs. Have we run into problems? I can understand how we might run into maybe a student has a parent who's not living in the home or whatever. But have we run into a lot of problems with students really, really, really not wanting to involve their parents?
Well, I don't have a specific, to say 10% of the time it's a problem. I honestly, I haven't surveyed our counselors or our administration to give you a real definitive, direct answer on that.
Yeah.
I think that our ultimate goal is to facilitate and help a student navigate having that conversation and to do that not only with our own staff ability, but if we need to bring in other outside resources to help accommodate that.
Social services.
That's really the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Okay, because I hear what you're saying.
We don't, I can talk more kindly and try to find softer words, but instead I'm gonna put it this way. What we don't want is I as a superintendent, I know I don't wanna put on a striped shirt, a referee's shirt, and put a whistle around my neck and get involved in trying to figure out what apparently is a family disagreement.
Right.
We're going to try to support our kids in a number of ways, and we want to teach them how to read, write, and do math. And some of those things are pretty challenging for us to try to help and facilitate those conversations, but really that's the goal.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, thanks.
It's also true that creating policy is just absolutely messy because we need to be able to take our values, we need to be able to take our reading of the needs of the district, we need to be able to take the law and statute and the tradition of interpretation that's binding and to be able to somehow put all of this together. And so as much as I read this policy and see the deep desire to be able to have conversations with parents and to have supportive meetings about this with parents, if we require that, that puts us in jeopardy with the law, because what it means is we are limiting the rights of these students. And so it's a situation where it's awfully complicated to be able to balance these things. I think that the policy is doing the best that we can to be able to adjust that while being in agreement with the law.
One really quick comment. I think the data right now that we have on transgender students is that a majority of them feel not supported by their family. That's not reflective of the community. That's the national data, right? The other thing that we know is that family support and school support are the two biggest factors in suicide ideation for these kids. And I mean, it's just, I just think this policy is really, really important. And giving students some autonomy in that with understanding parents, also understanding that every family is not like yours or mine or whatever, right, the case is. I'm not worried about the kids that have the support. I'm worried about the kids that don't.
Yeah, I think ultimately, for me, I think this particular issue is serious enough that parents need to be involved in it. And it gets tricky when you're trying to decide what is okay for the school to know and affirm without including the parents and allowing them to have.
Lindsay, what if the parents aren't engaged in the child's life?
Yeah,
What
they're
if,
not even
what if
present.
they're not a traditional parent like we think of parents?
And to me, then that is where potentially the note at the bottom of page 2 would come
Right.
into play. If
Yeah.
we are concerned about the safety of the student, then perhaps there does need to be a case where the superintendent steps in and says, we're going to hold off on reaching out to parents at this time. We're going to let the dust settle. We're going to call in outside resources. And that makes good sense to me because, to your point, I know that we're serving a wide spectrum of families, but ultimately, these kids, while they feel like our kids and our teachers love them as if they were their own kids, they're not our kids. They belong to their parents, and so. Again, I am concerned that we would find ourselves in a position where a student, for whatever reason, potentially they're just being a teenager and they are distancing themselves from their parents and they decide they don't want to include their parents in this. If the school moves forward and allows them to change their gender, their pronouns, their names, or their name, and then allows them to use a different bathroom, and the parent is not given the opportunity to consent, it feels like a break from our commitment to being parental partnerships, to being transparent in our communication and accountable.
One of the things I like about this policy that has been added is the emphasis on parental involvement. And I'm pretty confident, I know the school district well enough that they'll go to the end of the earth to get parent involvement in terms of and they'll also go to the end of the earth as far as involving outside resources such as social services and all these types of things. So, while I understand that concern, I know we're gonna make every effort to do that, to involve parents and, that type of thing, so.
I think the law has to carry a lot of weight on this. And the law right now on this is pretty clear. The other thing that I want to say is, as a gay person, I've had to come out to my family and to people, and you still come out. It's a lifelong process, right? It's a new people that you meet and things like that. And creating value of your family and you as a human is a lifelong process for LGBTQ kids and adults, right? So I think if you have never been in a situation where you have to be that, I think we have to be really careful about how we talk about it because you don't know. You just don't know.
So I think in my mind, there's a difference between coming out in your sexual orientation versus requesting accommodation for changing your gender identity, because if a student comes out to a staff member, they're not requesting any sort of accommodation. They're not asking for any sort of change in the way they're using the bathroom or.
No, I disagree. Here's the thing. Let me just bottom line. I'm not going to have a personal argument with this about you. I know we come at it from very different personal perspectives. The fact right now is with equal protection and the laws right now in Wisconsin, this is really clear cut. So to have a public disagreement about, right, one of the things that I value about this board is if there's anybody ever that has a question of if this board is representative of the community, you've never met this board. Right, because you have extremes and you have a big chunk of people right in the middle, and it's really, really which is why we don't always agree. That's what we're supposed to do. We are not going to agree on this. We both have different personal perspectives on it. There is nothing positive that comes from us having a personal disagreement about this in a public forum. We can have that when one of us or both of us are done being on the school board. But for now, the law is clear on this. The administration is clear on this. So I would like to step out of the disagreement respectfully.
And when you say the law is clear on this, maybe we just need to clarify one more time. The law is very, very clear on the restroom use and the pronouns, right? very clear on those two things, not as clear on the locker rooms and the showers, right? And the athletic team stuff, right? With WIAA's position. That's a whole separate deal. So, and the changing the legal documents in the school. So we're going to follow the law. We're going to do what is right for kids, but do it within the context of what is legal right now, what the law requires right now, whether we personally or don't personally agree with it. And then we're all going on that journey together to seek to continue to understand and imagine ourselves. Yeah, thanks.
In the state of Wisconsin, a child who's 14 or older can change their legal name without parent consent. That's how it works in Wisconsin. So, is there anything else? We have a motion that's been moved and seconded. We've had good discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries at a margin of 6-1. All right.
And this will come back in
This
our,
is going to come back in September for the second reading. September. I'm going to be gone in August, and I want to be here. And then we are going to move to the first reading of revised school board policy 411.2 related to bullying and cyberbullying. What I will tell you, if people are leaving, I want to thank you for coming and for caring about what goes on in our schools and for paying attention. And please keep doing it. It's just really great to have people who are concerned about our schools. So thank you. So the additions on bullying, it simply adds that we are adding cyberbullying as a named thing you can't do within our bullying policy. So it adds bullying and then cyberbullying together. So I think at this moment, is there a motion to approve the first reading of revised school board policy 411.2, bullying and cyberbullying?
so moved.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Bob. All right, questions or comments, anything else about this? We did discuss this at Ed Program. We talked about that's the definition, it's the adding of the calling out cyberbullying in this policy that is significant. Anything? Nope, not yet. We're not going to take a break yet. We got too much to do.
This is really, adding cyberbullying was really important. That's where I think most of the bullying is happening right now, so this is a good move.
And since we do have some parents here, please help your kids to pay attention to this because this has been a problem, particularly at our high school, and we don't like it. And so we are going to do everything that we can to make sure that we are not having bullying, cyberbullying in our schools. Anything else? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. All right. So now we are going to move on to finance and facilities. And Mike, would you give us a very brief
I can make
overview?
her
Brief.
All right.
Thanks.
Our meeting on July 17th, we talked about the kind of the closing of the 22-23 fiscal year. And we had an auditor in, I think, the following week, right? Tomorrow, we have an auditor coming in tomorrow, so.
Lynette's excited.
We discussed. Right. We'll let you know how the audit goes next meeting. We talked about the meal prices, and they're staying the same this year. So we have to, every year, have to approve what we charge for the meals. And so those are staying the same. We talked about the upcoming budget, some changes that happened. The governor has signed the budget for 23-24. So the school district's budget cycles, fiscal year is July 1st through the end of June. So we will have the final budget numbers in October, but we had a good discussion on the 23-24 budget. We also then, Jamie talked about the project oversight committee. We just kind of gave an update on what was going on with that.
Thank you, Mike.
And the bottom line is our budget is balanced and we're in good shape this year and next year.
This coming year.
This coming year.
Okay, this coming year.
Yes, coming year.
That's why I meant about next year.
So what the new budget does is it simply delays by 1 year when we start amassing essentially $1 million deficit because of a broken funding formula in the state of Wisconsin.
Can I say one thing that was astounding about this was that we were able to keep the cost of meals the same. With inflation and the price of everything on earth, it feels like going up. The fact we could keep that the same for families was just really cool.
Nice quick report, Mike. All right, we're going to go on to personnel. So the Personnel Committee met on July 17th. We reviewed our committee goals. We also approved, or at least recommended that the board approve the 23-24 employee handbook revisions. We received a certified staff update. We also talked about the process for gathering bids for consultation services related to proposals for our insurance. We recommend that the board approve a request for a one-year administrator license for our Montessori teacher who needs to, or a principal who needs to add licensure to, for her, for the state of Wisconsin. And we also heard about the 23-24 driver and bus driver and teacher bargaining agreements. And the good news is we have those ready to approve right now. We talked about the instructional coach job description, which is really, it's a shift. We are letting go of one job description because our instructional coaches at the elementary level used to be subject specific, and now they are going to be instructional coaches in general. So we needed to make that adjustment in terms of the job description. We also made a change to the elementary job, principal job description, because each one of our 4 elementary principals has an additional responsibility. This is good for people to know. And we aligned those with district need and the principal's abilities. We also then we went into executive session and we talked about negotiations and salary schedule adjustments for our extracurricular folks. So with that, at this point, I move that we approve the 23-24 employee handbook revisions. If you look for a summary, it's on page 58. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Is there a motion to approve the insurance consultation services request for proposal?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. A second?
Second. Go ahead, Allison.
Thank you, Ellison. Any further questions or comments? We talked about this during the committee. We were all there. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. One of the things that I liked best about that request for proposal are the questions, because I think that those open-ended questions are going to be revealing for us. At this point now, do we have a motion to request a one-year administrator license request for the Montessori principal?
So moved.
Thank you, Cindy. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Lindsay. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. We've also talked about the instructional job coach job description. I just gave the background about that this is not going to be subject specific. Is there a motion, please, to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Cindy. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Ellison. Questions or comments? I think this is going to be a good change. And thank you. I know Dave and Nate, you worked on that. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Is there a motion to approve the revised elementary principal job description?
So moved.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Lindsay. Questions or comments? I particularly like how those extra duties are aligned to what I perceive to be the principal's interest and ability. And we're able to do that because of Nate's willingness to continue as our safety coordinator, because he used to do that as an elementary principal, and he's continuing to do that now in his new role. So thank you again. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. And the final action for Personnel Committee recommendations would be the 23-24 extracurricular jobs salary schedule. Is there a motion, please? Thank you, Ellison. Thank you, Mike. Questions or comments?
I just, this represents a lot of work, and Dave is out in the hall back there. He deserves a lot of credit for this, bringing this up to date and putting This only gets revised every so many years, way too many years. So we brought it up to date. I think it's a very equitable approach, and thanks, Dave, for your work on this.
It's the two Daves, David Creel and David Bell.
And I think it's also sustainable too. I mean, I think we've got a framework where we can continuously update it
Yeah.
very easily as opposed to before.
We're in a much better situation on this.
Can I just make a comment?
Please do.
I think we all know, and David very well, that most of the people that are going to see an increase here in pay, they don't do it for the pay. They do it because they want to serve kids and serve the district. And so I think this is all the work that they put into this as just a small way that we can
Stipend.
honor the work that they do. So
It's a small increase on the top of a small salary for what they do. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. All right. It is very nice to be able to bring to the board our bargaining agreements. And Dave, would you quickly outline the bus drivers, please?
We'll see. I can talk.
You've got a big teacher voice.
Yeah, there you go. So the recommendation comes after multiple meetings with the bus driver representatives. It required a lot of patience this year with the budget scenario and a lot of uncertainty. And so we appreciated coming together and both sides being patient there. So in alignment with our strategic plan, it's critical that we have qualified and high-quality drivers. And so we were able to land through both base wage and supplemental increases, an increase of $1.56 per hour, which is about a 6.5% average increase for our drivers.
I think it's really important for our community to recognize how critical it is that our bus drivers are our bus drivers. It's not just a company that we hire to come in. These are people who we know, who we train, who are dedicated to our kids, drive our buses, the buses that we know are safe. At this point, is there a motion to approve the 23-24 bus driver collective bargaining agreement as
moved.
presented? Thank you, Alan. Is there a second? Thank you, Bob.
Just
Yeah.
one additional comment, and there's a good reason why they're ours. And Lynette, at some point, I was just struck by this again today, looking at another school district that hires a company to do it. We ought to have a conversation again, so we're all on the same page as to why we do our own bus thing and we don't contract it out to somebody. Because I think we've talked about that over the years. There's good reason why we do it ourselves, and it'd be a good conversation going forward. We're very fortunate. Bus drivers are a critical part of our education and what we do in the school district, and I think often are overlooked. So I'm glad we did this amount. This is really good.
We do it because it's efficient, and we do it because we like the safety and the security that they bring to us, and because we know that bus drivers often get invitations to kids' graduation parties because they've known them that long. I think that's lovely. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. And now is there a motion to approve the 2023-24 teacher collective bargaining agreement as presented? Thank you, Cindy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Alan. Questions or comments?
I really appreciated Chris's comments tonight.
I did too.
Yeah, that was very helpful for her to be here tonight. I really appreciate
It was
it.
really complicated for us this year because we started this well before we knew from the state what our finances would be. That's a really complicated part of the way that the state school funding process works. Fortunately, we were able to reach an agreement. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Do we have any proposed or suggested items for the next regular board meeting agendas? All right, we are going to schedule upcoming meetings. The Project Oversight Committee will meet Monday, August 7th at 3 o'clock. Educational Program Committee will meet Monday, August 7th at 6 o'clock. The Board of Education will meet in a joint session with the City Council. That's a really great thing that we do on an annual basis. That meeting will be on Tuesday, August 8th at 5 o'clock at City Hall. They are hosting this year. Finance and Facilities will meet Monday, August 14th at 6 o'clock. The next Personnel Committee meeting will be Monday, August 14th at 7 o'clock or immediately following Finance and Facilities. Project Oversight Committee will meet again on Monday, August 21st at 3. The next regular board meeting will be Monday, August 21st at 6 o'clock. All of those meetings are here. And at this point, I would like to have a motion. You all get to be done, but we're going to go on because I would like to have a motion to move into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985, 1A, C, and F for the purpose of an expulsion, early reinstatement, and consideration of an employment, promotion, compensation, and evaluation of an employee.
Stacy, I'll move that in just a second, but just so everybody knows, all of these meetings are open meetings. So
Yeah.
if you want to join us every Monday night,
Yep.
you know where to find us.
We're always here. Yep, and sometimes they go longer than this.
And more detail than what you see tonight, a lot more detail. So certainly,
So we have a motion, but we need a second to go into executive. Thanks, Lindsay. And now I need a roll call. Allison, Lindsay, Bob,
Yes.
Mike,
Yep.
Alan.
Yes.
I'm saying yes, yes. We're going to take 2 minutes. Stretch.